All right, today we are joined by the great Sean Jones, who is an absolute guiding force in the trumpet and education communities. Originally from Warren, Ohio, I believe. He's performed alongside Illinois Jacquette, Jimmy Heath, Frank Foster, Nancy Wilson, Quincy Jones, Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra, SF Jazz Collective. In 2011, he toured along Herbie Wayne and Marcus Miller in tribute to Miles, just to name a few. And these days, he wears many hats. He's the current head of the Jazz Studies Department at Peabody, the president of the Jazz Education Network, the artistic director for NYO Jazz, and as a band leader, he has a longstanding quartet and I believe 8 albums at this point. So with all that, Sean Jones, welcome to the Happy Musicians Podcast.
Tanner, it's an honor to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this wonderful discussion. It's timely discussion. It's a long time coming. I'm glad we're here.
Yeah, for sure. I know we're short on time and I have more questions than that allows for, so we're going to plow into it. But I wanted to ask, you have a hashtag you use on a lot of your Instagram posts and your blog posts. It's hashtag do your job.
Yeah.
What is that all about?
Well, I started it actually. It's sort of a play off of Bill Belichick, who is the coach for the New England Patriots. Mm-hmm. He would always say on press conferences, "Do your job, do your job." Basically, that no one is above anyone else. Everyone on the team has a function in the team, and literally, if you do your job and do it to the best of your ability, you'll win more than you'll lose. And so that hashtag kind of, put a little slang on it, do your job, meaning that practice every day, be a good person, work towards your goals. When you make mistakes, do your best to learn from the mistakes and correct them. Just general basic human decency is what that hashtag is about. Hashtag do your job. And one day, some days are better than others. Some days you hit the nail on the head. Some days you fall short. Some days you fall seriously short. But it's important to keep going. It's important to do just that. Do that job. Do the things that are inside of you that are beneficial not only to yourself, but to the community that you're in. So that's what that hashtag is about.
I love it. Well, in addition to everything mentioned, you are an active sideman, and it seems like you always have a new project you're working on. You're a big exerciser, and I'm curious, like how you manage to do all of this stuff and stay sane. And maybe specifically, do you have daily or weekly routines that you stick to, and what do those look like?
Well, the biggest thing now is I have a 13-month-old, so any idea or semblance of a routine has completely been obliterated, and it's a good thing. I'm able to focus more on family. I'm able to focus on someone else other than me, and it's and do it daily all day long. It's actually really nice. But in my development phases, and what I mean by development phases, I'm talking about high school, college, grad school. I had a very serious routine and a regimen, and that involved practicing certain time periods a day, 3 times a day. That involved scheduling moments where I would listen, scheduling moments to study theory and harmony, things like that. And as I got older and I started to get gigs and I would have to balance all of these things, then I sort of began to take one day at a time, but keeping the eye on the prize long term, if that makes any sense at all. Each day has its own idiosyncrasies, and you got to be prepared to deal with whatever may come. And I started to flow that way. Now, where the two meet, I would have to say, is Sunday evening. I think that we take Sunday evenings for granted. In fact, the entire day, that's Sunday, based on how we live and function in Western culture, specifically in the United States. The work week typically starts Monday, and then you get to Friday, and that's the beginning of the weekend after 5 o'clock. You got the rest of the night Friday, you got all day Saturday, and then Sunday you're starting to get ready to do it all over again. So Sunday for me is actually, it became at some point a moment of reflection and projection. In the
Mm.
morning, Sunday morning, I'm reflecting. And in fact, in a lot of this culture in the United States, what do people do on Sunday mornings typically? They go to church or do some type of family gathering or go to brunch together. You're reflecting on everything that you've done. And then what happens Sunday night is that is where you project. And I like watching the local news, and I like watching the local weather persons. And those local weather persons always give you what? They give you the week in view, right? And
Yeah.
that week in view is typically like, okay, for the next 5 days, this is pretty much what the weather is going to be like. And then on the weekend, we don't really know, but this is what it looks like it's happening. That's
Hmm.
what I try to do on Sunday nights. Now, obviously, with the family now, it's a little more difficult to do that because you got to be ready to catch a lot of things, and life kind of, it's a curveball all the time. But I think that that's a good thing to do if you're able to reflect and project on Sundays. Then that's a good thing.
I like that. I, for a while, since I've been out of school, I was convinced that to get things done, it was just a matter of being in a good place, and then whatever I feel good about doing in the moment, I will get done, which was a nice sentiment. But I'm realizing lately that I am not actually like getting the things done. So I'm definitely trying to find like some good patterns to work on things. But I
That's
love what
really
you said
hard.
about, yeah, for
That's
sure.
really hard, Tanner. And I'm sorry for cutting you off, but
No,
you
you're good.
brought up something that triggered something in me. And this is something that students have a really difficult time with, or anybody for that matter. It's the brutal self-assessment that's required when you're disciplined.
Mm-hmm.
Living with the need for relaxation and the need to be able to just be free and human and to not think about being your best self all the time. There's always this sort of balance that you're having as a human being where it's like I have conception, I conceive of my life, I'm thinking about what it should be, I'm thinking about my plans, I'm thinking about practicing and being a better person conceptually. But then there is the guttural self. The guttural self is the self that, man, I'm tired. I don't feel like doing this right now. I just want to be outside and I want to like just walk around. I want to just like have nothing to do right now. I want to just feel. I want to just feel. I
Mm-hmm.
saw a trial on TV where a man was being murdered over and over again. I want to process that. I saw someone getting targeted because they were Asian. I want to process that. I saw folks from the LGBTQ community being attacked. I want to process that. So we're constantly being faced with this, and man, that can lead you into like depression. It could lead you into a version of schizophrenia. And I'm not trying to say that these are things that you want to diagnose yourself as, but I do
Mm-hmm.
believe that there are variances of these mental conditions that we deal with literally every single day. And so what you're talking about is very difficult, man. And I think it's important to take kind of one moment at a time or steps at a time, or when you're feeling really overwhelmed, step away.
Mm.
You got to think like they tell you when you get on a plane ride, right? One of the first things they tell you to do is do what? They tell you to put the oxygen on yourself first.
Yeah.
First. If you can't take care of yourself and if you're not feeling good, then you can't be beneficial to society.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a tricky thing, though, like taking care of yourself first. It's a balance because sometimes I think there's sentiment that like you shouldn't care what other think about you at all, and it can almost turn into a very self-centered thing. And I feel like that's when I get most miserable, and also that rumination of just focused on like how to improve myself all the time. And you had mentioned your daughter. I
Mhm.
can't imagine a more profound way to be shown that there's value in like genuinely caring more about someone else than yourself.
That's exactly right, man. And if I could take a step back and kind of add the one caveat to what I was saying
Mm-hmm.
regarding, mask up or not mask up, but put the oxygen on yourself first. It's the purpose.
Yeah.
Perfect purpose gives you the why. And for me, putting the mask on myself first means that once I'm taken care of, then I can take care of everybody else. But if
Mm-hmm.
I don't have fuel, if I'm not centered, if I'm not at peace, then I can't help anybody else. So for me, it's literally about making sure that I have enough gas in the tank, oil in the reserves, and
Yeah.
windshield washer fluid to wash all of the crap away, that I
Mm-hmm.
have enough of that to be able to get down the road and be able to pick people up and we all get to that destination.
Yeah. That's awesome. I want to ask you about the program you've built at Peabody, but I want to get to it in a bit of a roundabout way. When I don't think it's off base to say that there's a bit of a schism. At least, I mean, it seems like it's uh, being broken down, which is for the best, but between maybe the informal bandstand education community and the formalized institutional education community.
Yeah.
And you decided pretty early on that you wanted to really go into education and be as much of a teacher and a professor as you were a player. And did you experience well and all that, like on top of that, at least in my consideration, you are in a tier of performing musicians that you often don't see chairing like college programs. When you were getting into formalized education, was there pushback from your own community that that wasn't a good use of your time and energy?
Big time. I mean, first of all, when I was coming up, the first thing I was told is I shouldn't be a jazz musician.
Hmm.
And I was told that because, they said that one, they don't make any money. And number two, they're all drug addicts. And also growing up in a Pentecostal church, man, that's the devil's music kind of thing. But I refuted all of that. And then I started to get into education. Excuse me. I started to get into college, and they were basically saying you got to be a high school teacher. You should get a education degree. And I'm like, that's not what I want to do. I knew very early on what I wanted to create as a path for my career. Pretty early on, when I was in college, I knew that I wanted to be a college professor. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason for it, to be honest with you, was that about 50% of those teachers that were in college, they were just relaying information that they read somewhere.
Yeah.
So it came off very sterile.
Mm-hmm.
Like there wasn't a whole lot of passion behind it. And that passion, that lack of passion, that was coupled with arrogance. I
Yeah.
know you don't know. What do you mean you don't know? Well, that's why I'm in school, so that I can learn it. I'm not. If I knew, I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't need to be here. So I thought to myself early on that I wanted to be in education because I wanted to be able to tell students the truth based on my experience on the bandstand, literally on the bandstand. So when they're asking me about, well, how did Wayne Shorter think about this tune? I was like, okay, well, Wayne said,
Yeah.
and Wayne said to me that this is what, well, how does Wynton Marsalis think about this? Well, Wynton said, it's a direct source.
Mm-hmm.
And I want it to be that. And I think that that's invaluable. I think that we oftentimes we don't put enough value on that. And we allow folks to move, in essence, straight from an undergraduate career to a doctorate, straight into the classroom without having any real experience.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a big issue, because ultimately, if you don't have real performance experience and you're out there playing. And I'm not talking about just touring. I'm talking about people that are playing in their communities. I mean, you have professors that don't even perform in their communities. Mm-hmm. That's ridiculous. Like, how, what are you talking about then? Like, how can you teach a student to perform and relate to the public and relate to people on stage and all of that? So early on, to answer your question in a concise way, early on, I wanted to be the voice of reason in the classroom.
Yeah.
That's literally it.
Yeah, I love it. And not even just, I think a lot of, especially grad students who have been inundated in the education system for a long time, I don't know how you couldn't go crazy, because you're spending all this time thinking about how to play music, and these curriculum are so intense that you don't have a lot of time to actually do it. So you're just ruminating on, like, how do I do this better? And you are getting better at it, but you aren't actually doing the practice. And I think that can drive you mad. It seemed like all the graduate students that I knew who were really enjoying it had taken a large break between their undergrad and their grad program. Yeah.
Oh, I did. I took a year off, and that year was a sort of a centering year, if you will. I decided that I was going to figure out what I was doing. At that time, I didn't know whether I was definitively going to go to Rutgers University or where I was going to go. I was just putting it all out there in the universe. And one of the things that I put out there, I said, okay, well, if I need to probably do something to save money. And someone said, oh, a cruise ship would be a good idea. Turned out it was like one of the worst things I could have ever done. One of the worst things and one of the best things, to be frank with you. I got out there and I quickly realized what I didn't want to do. And the cruise taught me that I didn't want to be someone's backup I didn't want to be like a pop performer per se. For me, I worked way too hard to just be playing behind somebody. Yeah. Like I worked way too hard. And so I thought to myself, okay, I definitely want a solo career. I definitely want these things. I definitely do not want to be out here on a cruise ship where nobody's going to hear me, or no one's even going to know that I exist out here other than my family. So I started literally praying to God, like praying to the universe, like, please get me off this cruise line. Well, God must have a sense of humor, because the cruise line went bankrupt while I was out there, and I was stuck out there, literally in the middle of the ocean, man. And with that level of failure, if you will, or that level of divergence from your career path, really kind of sent me down a spiral for a while. Like, okay, well, this is clearly not for me. It's not what I'm supposed to do. But for some reason, something just snapped in me and was like, no, this is what you're supposed to do. You're a trumpet player. This is you. And so I started getting up in the middle of the day, man. And we were all stuck on that cruise ship, the entire crew, with no food, no air conditioning, none of that. But I would go in the ballroom, because no one wanted to be in the ballroom because it was a little funky, because the air was, and imagine all those carpets and people dropping stuff everywhere, pretty,
I got you.
So I would stay in there literally all day, man, and practice. And around that time, an album called Citizen Tane came out, which is Jeff Watts's, I think that was maybe his first solo record. And that came out, and a tune called The Impaler came on. And it was ridiculous, went in solo. And I remember the drummer just overhearing me practice it. He walked past and he would say, oh, man, you can't play that. Blah, blah, blah. Just more doubt. And I told him, I said, if we're still on this boat by the end of the week, I'll be playing the solo. And he, ha, 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 yeah, right. Blah, blah. And I love someone challenging me and telling me what I can't do, because I'm going to prove you wrong immediately. Like I'll just go on a path like, okay, you're going to be wrong. And that's what I did. I played it for him on that Saturday, I said, listen to this, played it with the record. He was like, why? And he asked me this question, man. He said, why did you even come out here on the road on a cruise ship? And I said, well, I thought it'd be a good idea to save some money and all that. And he told me something that I'll never forget. He said, the worst thing an uncommon person can do is to play common.
Mm.
And I said, I took a step back. I said, what are you trying to say? He was like, Sean, there is nothing common about you. Nothing typical. You say, yeah, you're a typical looking guy, but I know what's in that brain of yours. And he was like, I have no idea why someone like you would play that common. And I walked away from this scenario with a big, gigantic like charge on me to like simply be me. And I think that honestly, all of us have that.
Yeah.
And it's a choice. It's a choice to either be common. And what I mean by common is like, all right, I'll just do this. I'll just do enough. I'll just be this. And you're not listening to that thing that separates you from everybody else. Because there'll never be another Tanner Gus. There'll never be another Sean Jones. There'll never be another whoever. And so with that level of individuality, I just automatically think that a dose of genius is just given to everybody. Just a dose, like a little seed with that individuality. And it's up to us to water that seed, to grow it, to make sure it gets light, to change the position of it. It's up to us to do that. And that's an active choice.
Yeah.
And that was my gap year experience. In essence, it was an awakening to who and what I truly want to be.
That's beautiful. And I imagine that's one of the sentiments that you're trying to foster now at Peabody. And that experience seems so cool. Yeah. I think a lot of us dream of like, if I had a blank slate to grow a program, that would be awesome. You rarely get that opportunity because you enter into a program that already exists. But it sounds like you were able to do something pretty special here where they asked you to come kind of revamp this thing and do with it what you wanted. And I'd love to hear what your vision for it was and the kinds of practices that you've enacted to foster your ideal learning environment.
That's a great question. And honestly, this is pretty much 20 years in the making. I've been in education teaching for almost 20 years now. And when I was afforded the opportunity to take this position, actually, if I may just give you a sort of a backstory.
Do it.
I started teaching in the year 2001. And I started teaching at Duquesne University. Actually, no, I started teaching at Rutgers first, excuse me. Rutgers. And I taught private instruction for 2 years. Then after that, I started teaching at Duquesne University. And I received tenure at Duquesne University. And I didn't like it. I didn't like having tenure because to me that meant I didn't have to work anymore.
You don't hear many people say I didn't like having tenure.
Yeah, well, again, I'm a peculiar kind of a soul. So, so for me, I immediately started looking for something else to challenge me. Yeah. And so I got the opportunity to teach at Oberlin Conservatory, and from there, I had the opportunity to run the brass program at Berklee College of Music. Fast forward a few years, this opportunity came along to revamp the program at Peabody at Johns Hopkins. And I thought to myself, I said, well, this is kind of the culmination of everything that I've been doing.
Yeah.
And the next question I asked myself, I said, if I was to create a program from scratch, what would it be? And then I asked myself the question that led me ultimately to what I'm about to say. I asked myself, what didn't I get in undergrad that I wished my teachers would have given me a little bit more of? And that's what led me to create this. And basically this degree is 2 degrees in one. I love the associate's degree scenario, associate's bachelor's. So in essence, the first 2 years is like basically an associate's degree. It's
Okay.
all about foundation, theory, learning tunes, learning how to write, jazz piano, things like that. 2 years, foundational. I think a lot of people, when you spread it over 4 years, you're basically just kind of like rehashing a lot of info and prolonging things for people. So it's like Tide concentrate for 2 years um, in terms of foundation. The last 2 years are literally designed for you to figure out what you want to be doing for the rest of your life, or at least for the next several years.
Yeah.
And for me, I didn't get enough of that in undergrad. It was just a random meeting every now and then, like, oh, what do you want to do? And it was like, oh, try this. I think that we need to do a better job preparing our students for graduation so that upon graduation, they're not shell shocked. So,
What are some
junior
of those
year,
things that maybe you were about to say, but some of the things you do to help students prepare for that big question of what they want to do?
yeah, that's the junior year. You have to do a performance. They call that a recital, but
Mm-hmm.
you have to write that music and arrange it. You can't just go up. You can't just show up and play standards. You have to write. You have to arrange. It's about the ensemble choice and size that you want to write for. I tell students to think about what they want to be doing upon graduation. Do you want to be playing primarily in a big band? Do you want to be doing small group? Do you want to do a mix of things? What type of style in the music do you want to do? And so that performance is all about that,
Mm-hmm.
reflecting who you are as a player. Your senior year is about documenting who you are as a player. So everyone will graduate with a sound recording
Cool.
of the material that they worked on their junior year. And if they want to revamp it, rework it, then cool. So by focusing on yourself for 2 years upon graduation, you have a pretty good idea of where you want to go, whether that be grad school, going into the field. You can even think about what city you want to be in, things like that. So I think that that's important. That's a thing that differentiates us from other schools.
Mm. Yeah, I like it. I I don't have my own program, so I settled for bouncing curriculum ideas off people like yourself. So I hope you'll indulge me, but I really liked the aspect of most people do a recital, right? But it can kind of be uh in the motion thing, and yours sounds like there's a lot of emphasis on decide like what music do you want to do and who do you want to do it with. And one gripe I have with the education or the jazz education world is that it seems to really emphasize this aspect of jazz music that is you can learn these standards and these tunes and this language, and then the end goal is just to have these like anonymous meetings with random people and be able to survive the gig, which is cool in a practice. Like there's nothing wrong with that. It actually is really fun to meet other people and to play and to be able to do that with that shared language. But personally, and it sounds like maybe this is the case for you considering like the how long you've had your band together, but playing music that you really care about, that's unique to you, with people you really care about, over time I have gotten way more energy and soul and just life fuel out of those experiences than I have playing standards with people I don't know. um, and I'm curious maybe if you feel the same way, and what experience has been like with your quartet over the years.
That's a great question and great thoughts. I think there's a mix. And the reason that I say that there's a mix is because I think that the United States of America, and I notice that I don't just say America
Mm-hmm.
anymore. I
Yeah.
think that living in this country, we say America a lot, like the United States is all of America, and it's only a
Mm-hmm.
fraction of what America is.
Right.
so,
Right.
so in the United States of America, I think that one of our biggest crises is this: I think that we are culturally in a crisis right now, and we have been from inception. From our culture in this country is largely based upon capitalism. It's good because it either makes money or it spends money. So good automatically is equated with that. At some point, the folks that are native to the United States and the folks that come in that are immigrants to this country have to grasp what the cultural ramifications are of e pluribus unum, out of many one. What does that mean in this country? What are our dances, our national dances? What are our national rhythms, our sounds? Who are our national artists? And we need to celebrate that more, so that regardless of where you come from, where your ancestors are from, you can point to things that happen right here in this country and be proud that you were born here. So that being said, I think it's important that we have foundation. We know about the blues. We know about bebop. We know about bluegrass, country, western, foundational things. All right. That's important. We also celebrate individuality in this country. The ability to come out of traditions and project your own individualism inside of it, which is also a beautiful thing. That's part of the freedom that we love to talk about so much. So I think that both carry equal weight, actually. And to be honest with you, those of us that have been able to survive and thrive in this industry, we recognize those that have both. Like you look at someone like a Robert Glasper. Robert Glasper can play a rhythm changes just as well as anybody else, but he's with his own band playing stuff that the average human being walking around, they don't necessarily know that that's jazz, or even from a jazz musician.
Yeah.
So I think that you need both. I think you need the foundation, and you need that sort of interaction where you can meet someone on the playing field and you both know the same language. It's like great football players. Mm-hmm. Like I love watching the baseball and those all-star games. I love when they all mix up and they can still function.
Yeah, that's cool.
Like that's really fantastic. So in essence, when we go to China, or when we go to Brazil, or when we go to Haiti, or when we go to France, or wherever we go, India, and someone says, all right, D flat blues, 1, 2, you know where it is.
Mm-hmm.
Now I don't believe that we're in the days where people are like, oh, you need to know hundreds of tunes, you got to know those, and you're not a jazz musician if you don't know hundreds of tunes. Well, that's kind of jive,
Yeah.
And it's not honest either. There are people that know hundreds of tunes that don't get gigs.
Mm-hmm.
Hundreds. There are people that can know it, and I know all the standards. Well, whoop-de-doo ding dong. No one cares. How are you making people feel? What are you doing with the information that you have?
Yeah.
That's what's important.
To take a step back to this, what I perceive as animosity sometimes between an informal education community and a formal education community. I don't know a better way to describe it, but it seems like sometimes there's a feeling that you can't. Sorry, let me try again. In an institution, the idea is that you can talk about music and some of the things that distinguish good music from not as good music, right? In a formal way to accelerate the learning process and make communication easier. but there's also a sentiment that in doing so, you lose the magic or the soul in music, right?
Yeah.
And ideally, I've found contentment when I realize that there's value in both perspectives and that there's somewhere in the middle. And I'm curious how you facilitate studying music without losing whatever that spark is.
Well, whether you're in an institution or not, you're studying music.
Right.
Anytime you're learning anything, you're studying it, whether formal or
Mm-hmm.
informal. And let's be real. And when you talk about the folks that are in formal education or in jazz education versus those that are, I got it out on the street, on both sides, the reason why there are attempts by individuals to discredit the other is one thing: insecurity.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is literally it. It's insecurity only.
Mm-hmm.
Folks that are, well, I got this out playing and I was on the road and you don't need to go to school and da 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 da. Well, that's not true for everybody.
Yeah.
I actually can't imagine my career without going to college.
Mm-hmm.
Then there are folks on the educational side, specifically classic, those that are from the classical side of things. And I'm not just talking about the genre, because that classical mentality is in jazz education too. Let's
Mm-hmm.
be real.
Yeah.
There are those people that say, oh, you didn't go to school, you don't know these tunes, you don't know all of Charlie Parker's solos, and you don't know what you're talking about. You know nothing. Well, that's ridiculous too.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, and it's personal for me because I literally just want it to be undeniable by anyone. I want it to be able to go out and sit in with the cats at the local, dive bar that never went to school. I wanted to be able to play with them, and I wanted to be able to sit down and play some pretty cerebral, esoteric music that's like, almost academic in nature, because I wanted to be a complete musician, as complete as I possibly could be. So, and that's honestly one of the other reasons why I got into the classroom. I wanted to break down all of those walls.
Right.
I mean, those walls are there in such a crazy way that it's really sad, it's really sad.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to break down those walls. And I'm going to also spend the rest of my life waving the flag of being a cultural ambassador for the United States.
Yeah.
For this country, the blues form, bluegrass, rock and roll, gospel music, hip hop, all of it, all of that stuff, man, that is the culture of the United States of America. Like, we have to come together with that at some point. And I'll just keep, likely it won't happen in my lifetime, but hopefully upon death, several years down the road, people will say, this cat was a thread. He was a thread.
Yeah. I'm saying it now. I think the work you're doing is amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah. There's another aspect of this music that I was never made aware of in school that I found outside that has been unbelievably compelling. Just to take a step back, in episode 5, Jameson Ross was on here, and he said his whole thing was like, what do you want to do? And I've been trying to figure that out ever since. And I realized what it was the other day, and I'm very excited, but it's hard to explain because I've only had a taste of it, and I'm hoping you can kind of help me out here. But there's a spiritual side of this music tied up in lineage and tradition that goes beyond just someone played this cool thing in the past and now I get to play that cool thing now. That maybe the best way to describe is like, I feel connected to something bigger. Like, there are these people that played this collection of vibration and sounds, and I can do that and have that same experience and know that there are like these other amazing people out there who are doing this. And now like my goal, like I just want to spend time with people who are connected in that community. And you had a caption on a post that summed it up well. I'm hoping you can follow up on. It said, I've only wanted to be a part of the lineage, the legacy of this music, to share the stage with contemporaries and elders that have and are curating the traditions of this music from its sacred places and be able to share it with generations that are after mine. What is that experience like for you, if you can explain it more?
Well,
Maybe like the ancestral pipeline. I don't know what else to call it. It's deep.
that's
That's all I know.
there's a great quote by William Blake, and it's in some people misquote it. They actually say Stephen Pressfield, but Stephen Pressfield was quoting William Blake in his book, The War of Art, not The Art of War, The War of Art.
Mm-hmm.
And he quotes this about halfway through after he talks about resistance and
Yeah.
resistance in terms of like being who you truly are as an artist. And this quote says this, and it's become like one of the quotes that I say all the time, and it's eternity is in love with the creations of time. Eternity is in love with the creations of time. Now, for me, largely because I grew up a certain way in Pentecostal church, and my knowledge based around religions and things like that has kind of come full circle for me. And I think of it all as spirituality, and they all basically say the same things, to be real. They pretty much all say the same things. And so my idea of eternity is God. My idea of eternity is everything that was, everything that is, and everything that will be. It's all one. It's all one big, gigantic thing.
Mm.
And we call that the universe. We call that nature. We call that the sciences. Some people call it God, whatever you want to call it. A creation of time is something that has a definitive beginning and something that has a definitive ending. This mute is a creation of time. This keyboard is down here, creation of time. You know what I mean? This hand sanitizer, creation of time. I am a creation of time. I was born May 29th, 1978 in Warren, Ohio. That's the beginning of me in this form. Someday, hopefully long in the future, I'm going to die. And then the story of Sean Christopher Jones, born on May 29th, 1978, Warren, Ohio, will be told. And that story is a blip in the time of all time. Now, why is eternity in love with me? A creation of time. My understanding of it is that all of eternity is made manifest by the things that are living and breathing and doing in the now, in the time that is now. So there would be no eternity without creations of time. You dig what I'm saying? So in order for all of eternity to exist and the glory of all eternity to be made manifest, that means to be made present, to be observed by others, other things. That means I have to produce in this time. So when I'm producing and I'm doing things and I'm teaching and I'm writing and I'm trying to make things happen, then I'm making all of eternity and its expansion, contraction, growth, and existence happening through this lens that is in my body. And if we all understood that as a charge on your life, then imagine the level of productivity that would happen in the world. Imagine the level of pain that would go away. Imagine the level of stress that would go away. And it's all based in every single person that comes into life on this planet, literally being their authentic selves.
Mm. And okay,
Authentic.
just to clarify, are you saying this, us as creations of time interacting with the universe, is it that interaction, that knowing sense of your ability to connect with the rest of the universe and that you can have an impact on it? Is that the the experience of this for you, or is it something else?
It's much deeper than that.
All right, help me
That's
out.
because I'm not separated from the universe.
Hmm.
I am the same. I'm the same thing as this thing that I hold in my hand. Think about it. This won't work unless I put it in a trumpet and blow through that trumpet.
Hmm.
This thing right here, that's a tool, only works if I, the animate object, takes this thing, puts it in another inanimate object, and I blow through it, and all of it vibrates. And it
Yeah.
turns into songs that could heal, turns into songs that
Hmm.
can reflect, songs that can be recorded and that could be listened to long after I'm dead and gone. That right
That's
there is that's the why for me. It's like not
hmm.
only I'm not just connected to the universe, I am the universe.
Hmm.
I
And
am like
wow.
I'm literally
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Music is such a cool way to experience that, because like you have this an inanimate object that you use to create this vibration, this connection, right? And
Yeah.
you learn to be one with this object, like that, knowing that it's a part of you. You can get to that point where it does feel that way, which is crazy, right? And
Yeah,
then
and that's
and you
the
talk,
deepest thing.
yeah, and you can
That's the
feel that
deepest thing right
vibration
there.
connecting with other people and
Yeah.
controlling that vibration.
Oh man, you're hitting the nail on the head. That's the most killing part of it all. It's like I can literally do this. That note E flat. I can feel it resonating in my body and its soul. I can feel that in songs that I've played, emotions. I can feel like it's like it brings out life. And then that leaves the instrument and touches the souls that are out there in the audience. Not just the souls, the birds hear it, the trees feel it, the
Mm,
people that are around, the animals, they all come subject to the vibrations of the universe. And the only reason that anything vibrates is because it what? It moves. It
mm,
moves. And so moving is doing. That's why it's important for us to do. It's important for us to move. And we are literally met with resistance at every form and fashion of our day. From the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed, there's resistance. There's resistance. And there needs to be resistance. There needs to be, right? So that we
right.
can overcome. That's how we evolve. That's how the universe expands and contracts. Because when
Well,
you
and
have movement and you have vibration, you also have friction. You can't have vibration. Oh man, you can't have vibration without friction, which is
yeah.
the resistance.
If there's no drum head for the stick to bounce off of, there's no sound.
Exactly. And so when I do this, that's literally that those notes are a sequence of vibrations that are met with the free flowing air that comes from my body and soul to the resistance of the instrument to vibrate the note E flat, which indeed does this.
Mm,
It creates movement and feeling, and it brings all of that negativity and positivity into flow. And then we all flow. And then it keeps moving and being. And then we go to the next note, the next song, the next painting, the next dance, the next struggle. That's why I love the blues, man. The blues
mm,
is probably the greatest human form invention because it's a self-propelling form. It literally
mm,
is struggle, release back into another struggle.
mm.
Struggle, release back into another struggle. And that's why you can listen. Think about it. What other genre, in what other form can you literally listen to all day and not get bored?
And it's a short form, like it's
Yeah.
Yeah,
It,
totally.
yeah, and that is so profound to me, man. I know I'm talking a lot about this,
No,
but
I
this
love,
is
this is it for me. This is
this
it.
is literally the heart and soul of this is the reason why I live. Like the only reason I live,
Mm,
the only reason is to be in vibration, to be in tandem vibration with the universe and the world around me. When I'm
yeah.
speaking, I feel friction coming up out of my body. Like I put my hand on my chest and I can feel vibrations. When I go, I feel the vibration in my body. And that vibration can only happen with resistance of the tone. The tone doesn't want to leave. It doesn't want to leave your instrument. It doesn't want to leave your body. It wants to stay still. But then
Mm,
you push, you blow, or you pluck, or you hit. And then that action releases the vibration
man.
into the rest of the world, which makes everything else vibrate around it. The same way that the wind blows across the sea or around or through these trees, or the wind takes the pollen from one plant to another. The plant doesn't want to give that pollen up, but the wind knows better. You
Mm.
get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, it's so deep, man.
I know it, for those listening, this does sound, it can sound really deep and maybe like it's getting away from us, but I have noticed a huge correlation between musicians who seem wildly happy doing what they're doing and how aware and bought into the idea that the physical properties of making music, the vibration and the sound, can have a deep impact on other people. That physical process and being connected to it seems to be a huge part of this happy musician's equation.
It is. That's the biggest part.
Yeah.
Because when you have this, then honestly, nothing else matters, man.
Mm.
Like when you have this, nothing else matters. In fact, you embrace everything that comes to you. Like you start to actually love resist. Like I love resistance in my life now. I love
Mm.
it. Because I'm like, every time resistance comes, then I'm like, oh, I got it. This is another opportunity to turn something into a vibration.
Mm. Come
This
on.
is another opportunity. It's like, oh, resistance. Oh, you can't do this. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Bring it on. Then the vibration. My push back against it creates the vibration, which creates the happening of the thing to exist anyway.
Yeah. Well, and it's, I feel like this is the thing that is being talked about in all these like phrases that get thrown about that feel a little empty or sterile, right? When it's like you're in your head. You're
Yeah.
only thinking about the picture of the note on the staff and this is an A, this is whatever, and not thinking about what it feels like. What it
Right.
actually is in the world is this vibration, right? Or does this music feel good or not? It's not a matter of like you could try to quantize it, but it's what's the vibration, what is the quality and the physical aspect of the sound and how you're connecting with it. It
That's right.
always seems to be the answer if I look hard enough.
That is the answer. And I said earlier, I said that it was deep. This is actually the simplest thing ever.
Mm.
What makes it deep is that we've been lied to from the beginning, not on purpose. The people that raised us and that helped us they weren't trying to lie to us on purpose, but they've been lied to too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's like we're born with a clean slate. And I know that now for a fact because I got a 13-month-old and I've been in a pandemic, literally watching her grow up every single day. She has no idea about race. She has no idea that this is hot or cold. She has no idea unless she touches it and experiences it. Like she has no idea. And so I'm thinking to myself, like, man, how do I keep my daughter free? How do I do this? I mean, man,
Wow.
it's like I break down in tears daily sometimes thinking about it because I'm like, she's free.
Mm-hmm.
How can I keep her from being in prison? How can I show her that resistance is going to come and that you could immediately turn it into vibration? How can I do this?
Mm.
And I'm like on this quest now, man, to afford her that opportunity. But I also realize that I can't do this for her unless I'm free myself.
Mm.
Like I can't even remotely show her how to be free unless I break my own chains. And
Well, and
that's
isn't that how you show someone to do something? Is by
it.
example?
It is. It is. And I literally every day, man, I take this into the classroom. I deal with this in my life with family, with people when I'm walking up and down the street. You know, we have chains on. That's that resistance. When resistance gets too strong, it gets so strong that fear creeps in. Fear is the biggest tool of resistance. That's its number one tool.
Mm.
Number one. And so it's like fear of your circumstances, fear of the other people around you, fear of your own greatness, fear of your own thoughts, fear of your own ability. And what it
Yeah.
does is just, it stifles you. And so when you start to feel like you can't move, you can't do anything, then what happens? You lash out.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
Anger
as a
comes in.
concrete example, I was afraid to contact you to do this email, even though we met at Gen and I felt like it was a good connection and I knew you were into the idea and would be a great guest, and I was still so afraid. And that resistance, and like now I'm just sitting here looking at the vibration coming from it, and it's just amazing.
Yeah. Well, you
Like I
did that.
can't imagine not. Yeah, I can't imagine not making this happen now.
Yeah.
But I was definitely afraid to do it.
You're right. That's a concrete example of that. So your fear could have been based on a lot of things, you know. And what's fear based on with us? It's our own idea of self, one. And I'm thinking about this for me, you know, Tanner. It's not me talking about you because I don't know how
Mm-hmm.
you feel.
Right.
But for me, in certain instances, I deal with this. It's like, man, I'm afraid. I'm afraid that I'm not good enough. I'm afraid that I'm going to say the wrong things. I'm afraid that, you know, maybe this band doesn't even want to deal with me, you know, or like, and maybe I'll send an email out to somebody and I haven't heard from them in a week, and it's like, oh, they don't want to talk to me, or I'm not, you know, all of these things, and their assumptions. That's another tool of resistance.
Yeah.
Assumption. Oh well, they must think this way because this is this. That's an assumption. You know, you never
Mm-hmm.
know. And so I'm so grateful that you whatever was going on in your head, I'm so grateful that you didn't allow it to put you in the chains of fear, and that you reached out and we were able to have this conversation. And I hope we can continue to have more conversations because the work that you're doing is extremely important. It's
Yeah.
extremely important because we can no longer afford, as purveyors of American culture in the United States, as purveyors and curators of this culture, we can no longer be in chains. We literally have to meet this resistance at every point if we're going to have a cultural identity in the United States of America. It is those of us that know the sounds, those of us that know how to manipulate the instruments, those of us that know how to manipulate color schemes, and those of us that can put together pictures and film and wonderful, beautiful choreography of movement of people and things
Mm-hmm.
like that to celebrate how we live as human beings and the freedom that we have to be able to do that while learning about everybody else's culture. Man, e pluribus unum could be this a really deep thing, man. Out of many, one,
Mm.
bro. Man, the power that can come from this. But I really truly believe that we have the burden, and it's a divine burden. You know,
Mm.
it's a divine burden in that Man, I'm getting like full thinking about it, man, because one of my good friends, he always tells me that it's a privilege to struggle. And then
Mm.
another friend tells me struggle gives you strength. And that's not, I don't think that there's something regal about being a martyr. But at the same time, it is extremely important for artists right now to understand that we have to meet the resistance of the moment, the resistance that is trying to keep us as human beings apart. It's important to talk about inequity and injustice. It's important to talk about all of these things, but it's also important to talk about togetherness. It's important to imagine the world that we want to live in. I just wrote a tune for our project Dizzy Spells, man, and the tune is called Pangea.
Mm-hmm.
Pangea was the notion that all continents were together at
Yeah.
one point in time. Imagine if that was the case now.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine if you could just drive to China. Imagine if you could just drive to Africa. Well, guess what? We don't have Pangea, but we have the United States of America.
Yeah. And we
Which
got
is
the internet now too.
And we
Like
have the internet.
we're getting connected again. I mean, and at E pluribus unum, like you can't get better than that than a bandstand. A band together, like sacrificing self-interest for the greater good and doing your part and creating something one out of the many. Like, come
Yeah.
on, like we really can set the precedent.
I'm going to quote my good friend J.B. Dias from the Herbie Hancock Institute of Jazz. And I borrowed this quote from him, and I'll continue to say it until the day I die. He said in a masterclass, a joint masterclass, I'll never forget it. He said, jazz is the greatest example of democracy because it is individual freedom with respect to the group. Yeah. Individual freedom with respect to the group. If we can embody that culturally in this country, then you will see an awakening around the world of what we can do as human beings. There won't be a need for guns anymore. There won't be a need for nuclear weapons. There won't be a need for people to hoard hand sanitizer and food when other people are out here on the street struggling. There won't be a need for billionaires. Think about that. A world where you don't need billionaires.
Yeah.
That's possible. But it starts with the arts and it starts with culture.
That's beautiful. I have other questions, but they seem less important now after all of that. So
but we got to do this again,
thank
man.
you for your time and just everything you've shared. Just incredible. And before we're done, if there's anything that you want listeners to be aware of right now, things that you're doing or projects they can be a part of, or even just plug your schools, like whatever you want to say, you have a minute.
Well, I got a lot going on, so just stay tuned. Check me out, Sean Jones Jazz on Instagram. I think that's my handle. Check me out on Facebook. Go to my website, sean-jones.com. And there's a lot in the works. Mm-hmm. If you're a Jazz Education Network member, make sure you check out what's happening coming up here in Dallas. The next year's theme is Renaissance, and it's indeed going to be that. And we're going to be loosely celebrating the 100th anniversary of the Harlem Renaissance. So,
that's awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This was incredible.
Thank you, my friend. All the best.
Yeah, for sure.